Dawn breaks over the Norman hedgerows on July 11, 1944, 3 days past midnight. The air hangs thick with morning fog and cordite residue. Somewhere in the tangled bocage south of Carentan, a Sherman tank crew from the 3rd Armored Division sits frozen in their steel coffin, listening. The radio crackles, static, then a voice come, precise, immediate. Baker 26, enemy armor, you're 11 o'clock, 200 meters, hold down behind the stone wall. The tank commander doesn't question it. He doesn't wait for visual confirmation. The 75mm gun traverses left. The gunner acquires the shadow through the fog, and the shell punches through the morning mist before the German Panzer IV crew even knows they've been spotted. The enemy tank erupts in flame. 30 seconds. 1. Kill, no wasted movement. U.S. 3rd Armored Division After-Action Report, July 1944. 2 hedgerows, over. A German tank officer watches through his periscope, confusion tightening his jaw. How did they know? The Americans had no line of sight. His own radio offers only silence, rigid protocol, and a command structure that demands written orders travel up and down a chain already stretched to breaking. By the time his battalion commander authorizes a response, the Shermans are gone, repositioned, waiting for the next kill. That battlefield has become a conversation. The Germans cannot join. This is not an isolated incident. Across Normandy, across the Pacific atolls, across the freezing forests of the Ardennes and the shattered cities of the Rhineland, American forces are moving, adapting, and striking with a speed that defies the expectations of friend and enemy alike. British commanders, seasoned veterans of North Africa and the Mediterranean, watch with a mix of admiration and bewilderment as green American units absorb lessons in days that took their own armies months to learn. Soviet officers, hardened by 3 years of apocalyptic warfare on the Eastern Front, note with grudging respect how quickly the Americans integrate new tactics, new weapons, new doctrines into combat operations. Soviet military intelligence assessment, August 1944. But it is the Germans meticulous, experienced, doctrinal who feel the deepest unease. Thereafter action reports from France, Italy, and the Pacific relay a pattern they cannot explain. American units that falter in first contact are lethal by the second. Mistakes that should cripple a formation for weeks are corrected within days. Tactics that fail on Monday are abandoned by Wednesday, replaced by something new, something improvised, something that works. The year is 1944, and the Western Allies are locked in the most complex military campaign in human history. Over 150 Allied divisions are engaged across 3 continents. The invasion of Normandy alone involves 156,000 men hitting 5 beaches on June 6, supported by 11,000 aircraft and 7,000 vessels. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, Operation Overlord, final report. In the Pacific, Douglas MacArthur's island-hopping campaign in Chester Nimitz's Central Pacific Drive, coordinate amphibious assaults across distances greater than the breadth of Europe. The logistical web is staggering. Fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, medical supplies, and replacements flowing across oceans and continents to sustain armies. Fats consume more resources in a week than entire nations used in previous wars. Doctrine should be rigid, here tested, proven, inflexible. The Germans fight with beggar Gunskrieg, maneuver warfare honed in Poland, France, and the vast steppes of Russia. The British rely on Montgomery's methodical set-piece battles, artillery superiority, and the hard-won lessons of 2 world wars. The Soviets wield mass, depth, and an operational art forged in blood at Moscow, Stalingrad, and Kursk. Each has a system, each has a doctrine, each expects the Americans late to the war, relatively inexperienced, industrially mighty, but tactically green too, learn slowly, to pay in blood for every lesson, to follow the pattern of armies past. But the Americans are different, not because they are braver. Courage is universal in war, not because they are better shots, or tougher, or more willing to die. They are different because they are failing faster, learning faster, and adapting faster than any army in the field. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, Rommel's Afrika Korps mauls the Green, U.S. the Second Corps, sending American units reeling back 50 miles, inflicting 6,500 casualties, capturing entire battalions. U.S. Army Center of Military History, North Africa. Campaign report: the defeat is humiliating. British officers whispered doubts. The Germans dismissed the Americans as amateurs. But within 8 weeks, those same American units, reorganized under George Patton and Omar Bradley, are hammering German positions at El Geta, integrating air support, armor, and artillery in combined arms assaults that force Rommel himself to withdraw. By May, the Afrika Korps is destroyed. 275,000 Axis troops surrendered, and the Americans are no longer novices. Allied Force Headquarters. Tunisia Victory Report, May 1943. The pattern repeats in Sicily, in Italy, in the Pacific. Each failure is metabolized, dissected, and transformed into new tactics within days, not months. Commanders are relieved without sentiment. Units are reshuffled without ceremony. Doctrine is rewritten in field notebooks and disseminated by radio. Before the ink dries, the Axis powers watch this transformation with growing alarm. German intelligence. Reports from 1944 describe American forces as unpredictable and tactically inconsistent, which is to say, they cannot be anticipated. Oberkommando, Der Wehrmacht Intelligence Summary, June 1944. Japanese commanders in the Pacific note with frustration that American tactics on Tarawa in November 1943, bloody, frontal, costlier, abandoned entirely by Quailine in February 1944, replaced by systematic naval bombardment, flamethrower teams, and infantry tank coordination that reduces Japanese strongpoints with ruthless efficiency. Japanese Fourth Fleet War Diary, February 1944. The question that haunts enemy headquarters from Berlin to Tokyo is simple and terrifying. How are they learning so fast? Doctrine takes years to develop, decades to perfect. Armies are institutions, weighted by tradition, hierarchy, and the inertia of bureaucracy. The Germans know this. The Japanese know this. Even the British and Soviets, adaptive in their own right, recognize the glacial pace at which military organizations evolve. Yet the Americans are rewriting the rules of war in real time, and no one, not even their allies, fully understands why. The answer is not in the history books they study, or the generals they appoint, or the battles they win. It is in something deeper, something woven into the machinery of the American war effort itself, structural, cultural, and technological edge, so fundamental that even the soldiers wielding it barely recognize its power. And on that foggy morning in Normandy, as another German tank burns and another American crew reloads, the truth is already being written in smoke and steel. The secret is in the radios, the maps, the meetings, the voices, the speed at which information moves, decisions are made, and failure becomes fuel. The Americans have not come to fight the last war. They have come to invent the next one. And the world is about to learn what happens when an army refuses to stop evolving. The secret is in the conversation. While German tank commanders wait for written orders and Japanese infantry battalions coordinate attacks through runners and prearranged signals, American forces are speaking constantly, instantly, across every level of command. The FM radio, frequency modulation technology pioneered by Edwin Armstrong and mass-produced by Motorola, Galvan Manufacturing, and General Electric, has been installed in nearly every American tank, half-track, jeep, and infantry company command. Post by mid-1944 Signal Corps Technical Report, SCL 1130, March 1944. The Germans use radios too, but theirs are scarce. Reserved for battalion and higher headquarters, their frequencies vulnerable to interference, their doctrine rigid about who may speak and when. The Japanese often lack tactical radios entirely, relying on telephone wire in defense and bugle calls in attack. But every American Sherman tank has an SCR 508 or -528 Seychelles rupees radio set, capable of transmitting voice over 4 to 5 miles with crystal clarity. Every rifle company commander carries a -300 Seychelles rupees backpack radio, 35 pounds of vacuum tubes and batteries that let him talk directly to his battalion, his artillery, his air support, without leaving the Foxhall Technical Manual TM11 to 242, 1943. The battlefield has become a web of voices, and the Americans are the only ones who can hear the whole conversation. The difference is not subtle. In the Falaise Pocket, in August 1944, as Allied forces encircle retreating German divisions, American armored columns coordinate with P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers in real time. A forward observer spots a German convoy moving through a tree line. He radios the grid coordinates to his battalion fire direction center. 30 seconds later, artillery shells are in the air. Simultaneously, the same coordinates are relayed to an orbiting flight of thunderbolts. The planes roll in, rockets and .50 caliber guns shredding trucks and half-tracks. The entire sequence from observation to destruction takes less than 3 minutes. U.S. The 8th Corps after-action report. August 1944. A captured German officer, interrogated days later, describes the experience in disbelief. We could not move in daylight. We could not move in darkness. They saw everything, and they responded before we could react. It was as if they knew our intentions before we did. Dramatized composite, POW interrogation transcripts. 12th Army Group. August 1944. The Americans are not clairvoyant. They are simply faster. Information moves at the speed of radio waves. Decisions are made by men, empowered to act without waiting for permission, and fire support answers in minutes, not hours. The technological edge runs deeper than radios alone. American artillery, the 105mm M2A1 howitzer, and the 155mm M1 Long Tom, is not inherently superior in range or explosive power to German or Soviet guns. But American gunners fire faster, adjusts faster, and mass fires faster because of two innovations: the Fire Direction Center and the Proximity Fuse. The FDC, a concept refined at Fort Sill and standardized across all American artillery battalions, is a small team of mathematicians and radio operators who calculate firing solutions, coordinate multiple batteries, and deliver tight barrages where dozens of shells arrive simultaneously, denying the enemy any warning or chance to take cover. Field Manual, FM 6240, Gunnery, 1943. The Germans, with their decentralized battery commanders, cannot match this concentration. The Proximity Fuse, developed by the National Defense Research Committee and manufactured by over 100,000 workers at factories, from Crosley Corporation to Wood, is a miniature radar packed into an artillery shell that detonates automatically at optimal height above the target, showering infantry and vehicles with shrapnel before they can dive into cover. U.S. Naval Ordnance Laboratory Report, December 1944. At the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, Yeoman infantry assaults that should overwhelm thinly held American lines are shredded by proximity-fused shells bursting overhead. A German regimental commander reports losses of 40% in a single attack. His men unable to understand why the explosions came from above, why their foxholes offered no protection. Dramatized composite, German 12th Volksgrenadier Division. Report, December 1944. But technology alone does not explain the speed of American adaptation. The deeper secret is cultural, institutional, and deliberate. The U.S. Army's Training and Doctrine Command, established in rudimentary form even before Pearl Harbor, operates on a principle radical for its time: failure is data. After every major engagement, American units conduct after-action reviews, formalized debriefings where officers and enlisted men alike are encouraged to speak candidly about what went wrong, what worked, and what should change. War Department Circular 3, October 1943. Lessons are compiled, analyzed, and disseminated through weekly intelligence summaries, tactical bulletins, and training films produced at the Army Pictorial Service in Long Island City. When the 1st Infantry Division struggles with German pillbox in Normandy, engineers at the Pensacola Naval Air Station weld salvaged German beach obstacles onto Sherman tank hulls, creating the Rhino tank that can smash through hedgerows. Within 2 weeks, hundreds of tanks are modified in field workshops. And the bocage previously a death trap becomes Navigable Engineer Board Report, July 1944. The British, methodical and hierarchical, take weeks to approve doctrinal changes. The Germans, proud and doctrinaire, resist admitting their tactics are failing. The Americans treat doctrine as a living document, written in pencil. The effect on the battlefield is devastating. At Peleliu in September 1944, the 1st Marine Division lands, expecting another frontal assault on Japanese bunkers, only to be mauled by an enemy dug into coral ridges with interlocking fields of fire. Casualties are staggering: 1,500 men in the first 2 days. U.S. Marine Corps Historical Division, Peleliu Operation Report, 1944. But within 72 hours, Marine commanders abandoned the island's airfield as the primary objective, shift to isolating Japanese strong points, and integrate flamethrower tanks, naval gunfire, and air-delivered napalm into a new combat arms system. By the time the 81st Infantry Division relieves the Marines, the tactics have been refined: bypass, isolate, incinerate. The lessons from Peleliu are transmitted across the Pacific. At Iwo Jima and Okinawa, American forces land with those tactics already drilled, already doctrine. The Japanese, expecting the same frontal assaults that bled the Americans in 1943, face instead an enemy that has metabolized failure into Science Joint Intelligence Center Pacific Ocean areas. Tactical Bulletin 21, March 1945. The Germans, by contrast, are paralyzed by their own excellence. Their doctrine, Begay Gunskrieg, worked flawlessly in Poland and France. It worked, with horrific cost, in Russia. So when it begins to fail in Normandy, when concentrated Allied air power and artillery make mobile warfare suicidal, when American tank destroyers like the M10 and M18 Hellcat, capable of 55 miles per hour and mounting 76 mm guns, ambushed panzers from unexpected angles, the German response is to double down technical manual TM9731B, 76 mm gun motor carriage, M18, 1944. Field Marshal von Kluge orders counterattacks at Mortain in August 1944, throwing depleted panzer divisions into American defensive positions, reinforced by massed artillery and air supremacy. The attack is annihilated. Over 100 German tanks are destroyed in 2 days. American losses. Minimal U.S. First Army After-Action Report, Operation Lutich, August 1944. A captured panzer officer, exhausted and bewildered, asks his interrogators a question that haunts the final year of the European war. How do you coordinate so quickly? We planned for days, and you respond in hours. How? The American intelligence officer, a former schoolteacher from Ohio, offers no answer. There is no single answer. It is the radios, the doctrine, the willingness to fail, the engineers in Detroit and Schenectady, the officers who listen to sergeants, their culture that treats war as a problem to be solved, not a tradition to be honored. And the lesson is about to be written in fire across 2 continents, in snow and jungle, in cities and fields, as the Americans bring their adaptive edge to bear on every front. And the world watches an army learn faster than its enemies can die. By the winter of 1944, the pattern is undeniable. Across Europe and the Pacific, American forces are not merely fighting, they are iterating, evolving with a velocity that transforms strategic calculations. When German forces launched their desperate gamble in the Ardennes on December 16, 1944, they achieved complete tactical surprise, smashing through thinly held American lines, encircling the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, and driving 50 miles toward the Meuse River in conditions fog, snow, low clouds that should ground Allied air power and neutralize American mobility advantages. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, Battle of the Bulge, Intelligence Summary, December 1944. For 4 days, it seems the Germans have found their opening, exploited American weaknesses, regained the initiative. Then the weather clears, and the American war machine, that vast organism of radios and trucks and depots and decision-makers, pivots with a speed that defies military logic. Within 72 hours, Patton's Third Army engaged in offensive operations 90 miles south, disengages and rotates 90 degrees north, and drives through a blizzard to relieve Bastogne. 3 entire divisions, over 130,000 men, with their artillery, supply trains, and fuel trucks, execute a maneuver that German staff officers, studying the operation after the war, will describe as impossible within a week, let alone 3 days. U.S. Army War College, Ardennes Campaign Staff Study, 1949. The Germans, committed to their offensive, cannot adjust. Their fuel is depleted. Their radios are silent or jammed. Their doctrine has no answer for an enemy that rewrites the plan mid-battle. The psychological impact on Axis forces is as devastating as the material losses. Interrogations of German prisoners throughout 1945 reveal a recurring theme: demoralization rooted not in Allied firepower, but in American unpredictability. A Wehrmacht lieutenant captured near Remagen describes his battalion's experience. We prepared defenses according to doctrine: interlocking fields of fire, pre-registered artillery zones, fallback positions. The Americans attacked from directions we did not fortify. When we repositioned, they were already gone, hitting us from another angle. It was as if they were making up the battle as they fought it. Dramatized composite. The 7th Corps POW interrogation reports. March 1945. This is not chaos. It is decentralized decision-making, empowered junior officers, and a command culture that prioritizes initiative over obedience. German and Japanese armies are built on the Prussian model. Subordinates execute the plan. Deviation is discouraged. Improvisation is insubordination. American forces operate on a principle called mission-type orders, borrowed ironically from German Auftragstactik, but implemented more radically. Commanders state the objective and constraints, then trust subordinates to determine the method. War Department Field Manual FM 1025, Operations, 1944. A platoon leader in the Hurtgen Forest, cut off from battalion, uses his radio to call in naval gunfire from destroyers 15 miles away on the North Sea coast, adjusting fire by sound alone. This level of autonomy, where a lieutenant commands the firepower of battleships, is unthinkable in Axis militaries. It is routine in the American system. The logistics undergirding this adaptability are themselves an act of industrial warfare. By 1945, the United States is producing 1 ship per day, 1 aircraft every 5 minutes, and enough ammunition to fire 23 million artillery shells per month across all theaters. War Production Board, Final Report, October 1945. But production is only half the equation. The other half is distribution. The Red Ball Express, truck convoys hauling 12,500 tons of supplies daily from Normandy beaches to frontline units, driven by predominantly African American troops, whose contribution to Allied victory is measured in fuel gallons delivered and bridges. Bypassed Transportation Corps Historical Report, European Theater, 1945. The refrigerated supply chain, engineered by Thermo King and Carrier Corporation, delivers fresh blood plasma to field hospitals within hours of wounds being inflicted, reducing mortality rates to levels unprecedented in military history. American soldiers wounded in Normandy have a 96% survival rate if they reach a field hospital alive, compared to 70% for German forces, who lack refrigeration, blood typing infrastructure, and the millions of American civilians donating blood through Red Cross drives U.S. Army Medical Department. Surgical Consultants Report, 1945. War is fought by divisions and fleets, but it is sustained by engineers, factory workers, and the women operating blood banks in Omaha and Detroit. The Germans understand this too late. By the time Albert Speer ramps up war production in 1944, the American industrial edge is insurmountable, and no amount of tactical brilliance can compensate for strategic exhaustion. In the Pacific, the pattern culminates in the island campaigns of 1945. At Iwo Jima, American forces implement lessons learned across 2 years of amphibious warfare: prolonged naval bombardment, underwater demolition teams, amphibious tractors that can cross reefs, close air support coordinated by forward observers landing with the First Wave U.S. Marine Corps. Iwo Jima Operation Plan, January 1945. The Japanese, entrenched in a network of tunnels and bunkers designed to bleed the Americans through attrition, fight with suicidal determination, but American forces no longer fight the same battle twice. Flamethrower teams, tank infantry engineer task forces, and systematic cave-sealing operations reduce Japanese strongpoints with methodical efficiency. The cost is still horrific: 6,800 American dead, 21,000 wounded, but the ratio is shifting. At Tarawa in 1943, American forces suffered 3,400 casualties to kill 4,700 Japanese defenders, nearly one. At Okinawa in 1945, American forces inflict 10 Japanese deaths for every American killed, not because the enemy is weaker, but because American tactics have evolved beyond recognition. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Pacific Theater Casualty Analysis, July 1945. Japanese officers, in their final radio transmissions before death or capture, express not hatred, but incomprehension. The Americans do not fight as they did last year. They do not fight as they did last month. How can an army change so completely? Dramatized composite, intercepted Japanese 32nd Army communications, June 1945. The strategic implications extend far beyond. 1945. When the Cold War crystallizes, NATO doctrine is built on the American model: decentralized command, combined arms integration, rapid adaptation to technological change. The air-land battle doctrine of the 1980s, which envisions deep strikes, fluid maneuver, and real-time intelligence fusion, is a direct descendant of the radio fast adapting system born in Normandy and the Pacific U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. Air-Land Battlefield Manual, 1982. In the Gulf War of 1991, American forces destroy the world's fourth-largest army in 100 hours using GPS, satellite communications, and mission-type orders that allow company commanders to exploit opportunities faster than Iraqi division commanders can react. The echoes are unmistakable. The Iraqis, trained by Soviet doctrine and equipped with Soviet weapons, fight with the rigidity of the Wehrmacht, competent, brave, and catastrophically unable to adapt. U.S. Department of Defense. Conduct of the Persian Gulf War Final Report, 1992. The lesson, written in 1944 and rewritten in 1991, is this: in modern war, the side that learns fastest wins, and the side that cannot adapt dies. The human cost of this adaptation is rarely calculated. For every radio operator who coordinates a perfect fire mission, there is a soldier who died in the failed assault that taught the lesson. For every tank crew that survives because doctrine changed, there is a crew that burned before the change was made. The 29th Infantry Division, bloodied at Omaha Beach, loses 3,000 men in June 1944, learning how to fight in the Bocage 29th Infantry Division, After Action Report, June 1944. Their deaths purchase knowledge that saves the 30th Infantry Division in July, which saves the 1st Infantry Division in August. This is the arithmetic of adaptive warfare. Failure is expensive, but repetition is fatal. The Americans pay the cost once, disseminate the lesson, and never pay it again. The Germans pay the cost once, dismiss it as bad luck or poor execution, and pay it 1,000 times more. And so the war ends, not with a single climactic battle, but with the slow, grinding collapse of enemies who could not evolve fast enough to survive. The Wehrmacht, tactically brilliant to the end, surrenders in May 1945 with intact divisions and operational tanks, defeated not by superior courage, but by an enemy that adapted faster than German doctrine could respond. The Japanese Empire, fanatical and unbroken, contemplates surrender after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the nuclear bombs are merely the final expression of a pattern, established over 3 years. American forces identifying weaknesses, exploiting them ruthlessly, and iterating toward total victory faster than any defense can solidify. In his final radio address before Japan's surrender, Emperor Hirohito does not cite the atomic bombs alone. He cites the general trends of the world, a euphemism for the crushing realization that Japan cannot adapt quickly enough to match an enemy that treats war as an engineering problem. Imperial Rescript on Surrender, August 15, 1945. The lesson is not that Americans were smarter, or braver, or destined for victory. The lesson is structural, cultural, institutional. Armies that empower their soldiers to think, that treat failure as information rather than disgrace, that build systems for learning rather than